Have you done anything to work with other agencies to tackle the human and drug trafficking in Indian country related to the border crisis?
Since the president has been in office, Congresswoman...
That is a yes or no question. Can you answer? Would you please answer my question?
Mr. Chairman, can you let the Secretary answer the question?
She's not answering my question.
Congresswoman, since the president has been in office, he has restarted the White House Council on Native American Affairs. These are issues that we discuss. We take an intergovernmental approach to all of Indian country.
What have you done specifically to work with Mayorkas to close the border in order to protect our tribal communities from the cartel criminal activity?
Congresswoman, that is not in the department's mission. We manage our public lands,
so
and we
I take
also
it that means you've done
uphold the trust and
nothing.
treaty obligations of our nation's Indian
You have not
tribes.
done anything to work with Mr. Mayorkas, is that correct?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
I want to clarify a few things. You are the Secretary of the Interior, correct? You are not the Secretary of Homeland Security, correct? The jurisdiction for border enforcement largely falls under the Secretary of Homeland's department. Is that correct?
That is my understanding.
And I think it is profoundly unfair of a line of attack to come in for explicitly targeting a secretary whose jurisdiction is legally bound for not being nominated to a different department. And I think it's profoundly important that we have clarity here on the jurisdiction of the Interior. I also find it very odd that there seems to be this push for you to be coordinating with Secretary Mayorkas when the Republican majority has voted to impeach Secretary Mayorkas on no evidence, with no allegation of a specific crime. And yet, if their allegation is that this is a reckless individual, they also seem to be alleging here that you should somehow be responsible for working with that. So that, to me, also, I find to make no sense, and also cuts to the core of what this whole immigration thing is about here, which is unfortunately not a solution, but politics. And it's about not making sure that we solve this issue, not providing a path to citizenship, not ensuring that we are providing resources to judges to adjudicate these cases, but to continue to restrict the resources and policies necessary so that there continues to be a problem, so that it can continue to run a news cycle. We are better than this.
Who is enforcing this on-demand gender check? You didn't put that into the bill. Seems a little creepy that we don't know who's going to be determining genders here. Ms. Hageman, I'm deferring to you. You're the only one that wants to speak on this. It's interesting, you're the only one who wants to speak on this. No one else will even touch this, because it's kind of creepy that you're setting up on-demand gender checks. Kind of obvious.
Order? Are you calling me creepy?
I'm saying it's creepy that you're setting up an on-demand gender check and you won't tell us how you're going to enforce it.
May I respond to that? Will you engage in it colloquially?
Tell me how you're going to enforce it, yes.
Well, according to the U.S. boxing transgender policy, they're the ones that plan on doing the inspection. The athlete has declared that her gender identity is female and has completed gender reassignment surgery. So
how
not
do they inspect
protecting
it?
girls and women
How do they inspect it?
protects us. That, I guess you're going to have to ask the Boxing Association.
Shouldn't you know? This is your
they're
bill.
the ones that have adopted the policy.
I reclaim my time. They don't know. They don't know. They see a small issue that's happening in a few communities, and they want to extrapolate that across America, and they want you to think it's a thing. It's not a thing.
I know what a woman is. I do not need to be lectured that somehow by saying that men cannot compete against women, we are hurting women and girls. That is an insult to women and girls. It is an insult to me personally that you believe that I am not capable of understanding the difference between women and girls and men and boys. I also believe that the entire argument is focusing not on the issue at hand, again, whether men and boys should be able to compete against women and girls in the Olympics, which is all that this bill does.
It is no secret, if you are paying attention, that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have decided that this congressional term would be about bringing up the issue of trans kids and their families and gay Americans relentlessly. Amendments and bills and riders constantly, as if we have nothing better to do than to demonize our fellow citizens, because that's what we're talking about here. It's about constantly trying to get Americans to hate one another. It is about dehumanizing children.
Ms. Hageman made a series of what are essentially appellate arguments.
A couple of things. To conflate the outcome of the two cases between Hunter Biden and President Trump is an absolute absurdity. It's also an absurdity to claim that the outcome in one case with Hunter Biden being convicted today is reflective of the viability or legality of what happened in New York is also absolutely absurd.
Maybe she didn't enlighten us as to the difference?
I'd be happy to, but I do not understand why that would be at all relevant to the
Because you brought
discussion
it up.
that we're having today, but I'm happy to have that debate
Please.
with you any day of the week. It's in the fact that the expert witness, who is the federal election, former head of the Federal Election Commission, was excluded from testifying as an expert witness in the case in New York, despite the fact that he has been qualified as an expert witness to testify on these matters throughout the entire United States. It is the fact that there were other witnesses that were excluded. There was substantial evidence, prejudicial evidence, that was admitted during the course of the trial.
She says that this or that witness should have been allowed to testify beyond the domain that the judge allowed him to testify. For example, Brad Smith was allowed to testify within a certain range, but not on irrelevant things. Now, she says, it should have been the full 100 yards of the football field and not the 20 yards that he was allowed to testify on. Great, that's an appellate argument. Ms. Hageman sounds like an excellent criminal defense appeals lawyer, but is it grounds for attacking the rule of law in America and the system of justice in New York, much less the federal system of justice, which had nothing to do with it? And they're deliberately confusing people about that. Hunter Biden was prosecuted by federal prosecutors in federal court. Donald Trump was prosecuted in that particular case in state court by state prosecutors. I thought state law and the federalist system was something they supported, but apparently not. Not if it goes against Donald Trump. They're willing to just throw the whole thing out the window.
Ms. Foley, is there a due process and equal protection aspects to statutes of limitations?
Well, I mean, statute of limitations can be, I guess, evaded, I suppose, in ways that could violate the due process or equal protection.
Well, and in fact, in this kind of a circumstance, that's what you see. We've got a situation where the alleged crime was committed in 2016, and they had to bootstrap it to something that occurred years later to try to resurrect what was really a dead case. And the way that I look at statutes of limitations as someone who practiced law for well over 30 years is that people have memory issues. That's why there's a statute of limitations. Can you remember what you were doing on June 13th, 7 years ago or 4 years ago? I'm sure Mr. Ambassador cannot.
Before I start my line of questioning, I just have to make a comment about something one of my colleagues said earlier on the other side of the aisle. There was implication made that E. Jean Carroll must have had memory problems. She couldn't possibly have remembered what happened to her. And I just am so incredibly shocked by that statement. I can tell you, when someone has been sexually violated, they don't forget who did it. A jury found him liable, him being the former president, for sexually abusing and defaming E. Jean Carroll. Those are the facts. A jury found that. And I just think it's shocking that somebody on this committee would not only attack juries, we are the Judiciary Committee after all, the onslaught against juries on this committee is shocking to me, but also to use time in committee to further defame E. Jean Carroll.
I do not believe that it is kind or compassionate to erase biological women and girls and pretend that they are the same thing as a man who claims to be a girl. I do not believe that that is kind and compassionate. I do not believe that it is kind or compassionate to allow men and boys to dominate women's athletics. I do not believe that it is kind or compassionate to deny a girl a college scholarship because a boy was faster and stronger. Stop attacking Republicans simply because we're trying to protect women and girls. We are very sincere in our belief that it is critically important that women and girls are able to access and participate in athletics. We believe that it is incredibly important that 13-year-old girls are able to play volleyball and basketball without the risk of being injured by a man or a boy.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
I guess it's a good thing that some folks on the other side are now interested in what happens in a locker room, and we're not going to look the other way. Okay? I'll accept that. But this is something that is not a thing. It's not a thing. We have things happening in our community that are a thing. Kids getting mowed down by assault rifles at their school, that's a thing. Young women in their community having IVF treatments banned, that's a thing. Women being forced into government-mandated pregnancies, that's a thing. And those are all things that we can address in this committee. But okay, I'll play out this exercise with y'all. How are you going to enforce this? I know I'm yielding to somebody over there. Tell me, how are you going to enforce this? This is an on-demand gender check that you want to be a part of now. So who's enforcing it? Is Mr. Jordan enforcing it? Is Mr. Gates enforcing it? There are things, gun violence, fertility bans, government-mandated pregnancies, those are things. This is not a thing. Ms. Jackson Lee, who has a bill to address the targeted violence against the transgender community, that's a thing. That's something we should be working on. This is not a thing, and so I just invite my Democratic colleagues who have so passionately spoke on this to continue to passionately speak on this, but to just reject this as a thing. And thank you for caring about what happens in locker rooms. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Yep. The gentlelady from Indiana is recognized.
Secretary Haaland, I'm going to say it because I think it's important too. You are the first Native cabinet secretary in the history of the United States. Is that correct?
Yes, Congresswoman.
Let alone the first Indigenous woman to ever serve as a cabinet secretary in the history of the United States from either party. Is that correct?
Yes, Congresswoman.
I find the notion or the suggestion, and it's not just because of your identity, it is because of your record, the insinuation that you do not care for, or the insinuation that you are not extraordinarily attentive to tribal issues to be deeply offensive. It is deeply, deeply offensive. And you are not in a position to speak up for yourself because you are an eminent professional, and I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it because this woman has served on this dais too, and I had a front row seat to how she advocated for Native communities here in the United States Congress too. And the insinuation that that is somehow not central to her mission here is just completely unsubstantiated. And that's a line that we should not cross. It's just not. Tribal consultation is very important, and it is fraught. Different tribes have different standards for consultation. Is that correct, Secretary Haaland?
Yes, Congresswoman. No tribe is a monolith. Tribes are not. They're in different areas of the country. They're all going to have different experiences and advocate for different things.
And so it is extraordinarily challenging when we have such a great diversity of our tribal communities in this country to meet all these different standards of consultation. But the Department of Interior has taken historic measures to meet everyone where they are at. Is that correct? Is that a fair assessment to make?
Congresswoman, when we first got into office, I'll just point out that we had a consultation on tribal consultations. We got tribes together to ask them, what's the best way for us to meet you where you are? And so we take that information and it helps us, guide us through how we do consultations for various issues through the various bureaus and offices, but also in general for Indian country.
Thank you very much, Secretary Holland. And, while I am sure that there are places where we always can improve, and there are places where we can always make sure that we meet people better, I want us to be very mindful about the individual that we are speaking to here, and to make sure that we're doing that with respect. And with that, I yield back.
At the top, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a New York Times article from June 2023, how the GOP picked trans kids as a rallying cry.
Objection. Gentleman objects.
So here we are, spending time once again, using our valuable time to pick on a class of people in this country. I believe I'm the only person on this committee who represents the LGBTQ community, though I always say that we know of. And I have to tell you, I've been absolutely stunned by the amount of time and energy that we have spent in this Congress talking about trans kids, their parents, gay Americans, that somehow my community is the source of all that is wrong in this country. And I want to associate myself with the remarks of Ms. Jackson Lee from Texas and Ms. Jayapal from Washington. This is about basic humanity. This is about dignity. As a former teacher, I can tell you it is hard enough to be an adolescent without getting all of these messages from our elected officials that somehow they are not worthy, they are not loved. And some of the rhetoric that I hear right now in this body is about making them less than human. And all they want to do is live their lives. Attend school, have friends, participate in sports. Know that their government is not using every opportunity to fan the flames of fear and hatred. Now, I understand that there are some people in this room and in this body as a whole that may actually believe the rhetoric, may actually believe that you are doing good. But I'm telling you, it has a devastating effect on children, on teens, and their parents. In this committee, we had a hearing on trans kids generally and the danger, essentially, they were to the American way of life. And right there in that seat, we had a conservative Republican woman who came to talk about her experience trying to raise her trans kid and what it felt like for her to sit in this body and have members of her own party try to treat her as if she were somehow doing damage to her child by simply trying to hold her for all that she was. I don't believe that you think you're doing real damage, but I'm telling you, you are. This is not how we should be spending our time. We should be spending our time uplifting Americans, alleviating suffering, letting Americans know that we believe in them and we support them. And not this fear-mongering, this constant fear-mongering in this Congress. People who just want to live their lives and the families who love them. I yield back.